Welcome, everybody, to Freelance Writing Direct. I'm your host, Estelle Erasmus, the author of Writing That Gets Noticed, Find Your Voice, Become a Better Storyteller, Get Published, and it is now a course at NYU and an elective towards the journalism certificate. Every week, I speak with novelists, with authors, with writers of every niche to talk about their tips, their tricks, their strategies, and how the sauce is made, including creative advice. I'll talk about essays and articles and share my own experience from 3 decades of publishing. So join me every week and grow your business and build your craft with Freelance Writing Direct. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes, and follow along on Substack, where I share special clips for subscribers only at estelleserasmus.substack.com. Welcome, everybody, to this episode of Freelance Writing Direct. I'm your host, Estelle Erasmus, the author of Writing That Gets Noticed, which poets and writers named one of the best books for writers. Now, today, I am so excited to speak with Anne Garvin. And I want to talk to you a little bit about Anne Garvin, and we're going to be talking about her fantastic book, Bummer Camp. So Anne is the USA Today Bestselling author of There's No Coming Back from This. I Thought You Said This Would Work. I Like You Just Fine When You're Not Around, and other funny and sad novels about people who do too much in a world that asks too much from them. Anne teaches in the low residency Master of Fine Arts program at Drexel University and lives in Wisconsin with her anxious and overly protective dog, Peanut. Yeah. She is the founder of the Tall Poppy Writers and is dedicated to helping authors find readers and vice versa. For more information, visit www.annegarvin.com. And I'm so excited to talk to you today about Bummer Camp.
Oh gosh, it's so exciting to have someone excited.
Well, I get excited about good books, and that's why I like to have authors from good books on my podcast and to talk about the structuring and all the nitty-gritty details that go into writing a book. But I want to preface this by saying that I met Anne briefly when we were both faculty at the Irma Bombeck Writers Workshop. I can't even tell you how much I love being a part of it and going to the conference and just enjoying. And I'm somebody who not only do I teach, but I like to always be continually learning. And so that's something that I feel that you can do at these kind of workshops. So, and this book, Bummer Camp. Now, one would think with the title that it's a YA book, but it is not. It is a book for adults. It's funny, it's sad, it's everything I love about books. It's pop culture, it's zeitgeisty. We have everything from nicknames to sibling relationships to neurodiversity to pregnancy to hookups to relationships to finding love, not in the beginning of the book, but sort of more towards the middle of the book. So can you explain the premise of Bummer Camp and how long it took to write it and how you decided to focus on this particular story?
So the premise started, like when I first started thinking about it, I thought I wanted to write a story about a failed motivational camp who takes over a kids' theater camp, turns it into a camp for anxious and depressed adults. And then the only people that ever work at camps are college students. And usually they're anxious and depressed. So that's kind of where I came up. I came up with that idea and I was like, I really want to, that's the story I want to write. What if you put all these people, which is really all of us? I mean, we're not all anxious and depressed, but we all have at some moment in our lives been anxious and or depressed. And what happens when you put us all into a very closed world and then threaten to take that world away? And so that's where the idea came from. And then I wrote a character because I thought, who would be the absolute worst. This would be their worst nightmare. And I created Kat, the woman who grew up on that camp. And not only does she not want to go back there, but she also knows it's her family legacy and she doesn't want to see it go under, especially with unscrupulous people. So she's always in this place where she's trying to stay out of it, but also cares about it, but doesn't want to care
Yeah.
about it.
It's really interesting to me because characters have to resonate for the audience, for the reader.
Mhm.
And you set up these characters as very real people with real emotions, with real problems. And you gave each of them a particular issue that they were dealing with, whether it's a personality quirk or a way of emotionally kind of looking at the world, a worldview. And I thought that was a very clever thing to do because it immediately kind of honed you in on who the character was. And then I saw that you supported it throughout the book with particular situations, and then they're reacting, and you're not thinking, oh, this is out of left field. You're thinking, oh, yes, of course, because she doesn't like to rely on people, for
Mhm.
example. This
Right.
is how she would approach and think about this situation. So how did you decide on these, strategic and clever ways of working with the characters?
So often, so one of the things is that when I was first talking, I wrote this book so long ago in 2016, but then I had to rewrite it multiple times to make it work. I didn't get it right because I didn't get the character arc right away. So, but one of the agents that I was working with said, he's not actually my agent, but I was, pitching the book to him and he said, "Who cares about a summer camp? Nobody cares about a camp." And I said, "Right. Well, nobody does. We care about the people at the camp." And then he said, "How are you going to make me care about those people?" And I thought so much about that because I thought, well, what is it about this camp? And I was a camp nurse at a handicapped kids camp. Handicap is, I always go into that language because that's what we called it when I was a nurse there. So there were sight impaired, hearing impaired, and differently abled adults. And that camp was such an important moment in my life because there's nothing like being in a closed space where you create those people as your family and you know everything about them and you know everything that is important to them. And I wanted people to understand that you have to get into this camp, you have to understand what it means to the people. And so I worked really hard to identify who those people are. Why would they be working at the camp? What was it about this camp that was their whole world? So that you really invested in the camp as well as the characters. And so I made very particular choices, knowing what I know about people and about closed units and about people that come to go to work at a camp because they're really different people. People that will come to a camp are more interested in helping people and being outdoors than making money. And
I,
then they
yeah.
may need a place, they may need a place like that. And so, but I really wanted people to feel that when I was writing it.
I love how you incorporated your background as an RN and the experiences that you'd had with differently abled people and with handicapped people, and really brought that into the environment. And most people, yes, can relate to the idea of summer camp, but you also evoked the emotions of summer camp, which I mean, my daughter is 15. She just aged out of sleepaway
Oh
camp.
no.
This was her last summer. Yeah, she wants to do like a college type program next, maybe. But it definitely had that, you're able to kind of learn who you are and experience it in different ways than when you're home, set in
Yeah.
the roles that you have in home. And one of the things I said to my daughter before she left the first time for sleepaway camp, she might not have even appreciated it as much because she was young, but I said, this is your chance to reinvent yourself.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
your chance to, if you are not considered funny at home, then, experiment telling
Hmm.
jokes because you can. It's this
Hmm.
kind of open atmosphere.
Yeah.
And while there are, of course, rules that we have to
Sure.
follow in life,
Yeah.
It has that feeling, and I don't want to give your whole book away because it's such a fabulous ride, and it really is like a roller coaster ride. Like I was like, "Ooh, what's going to happen?" And each time a conflict would arise, I'd be like, "Ooh, okay." And it's sort of like people, you think they're one way and they're another,
Right.
whether good, whether bad, or you're wondering how the sibling relationship that's so fraught is going to
Mm-hmm.
evolve, and what they're seeing in each other.
Yeah.
And Kat is a very interesting character because she has turned her back on a lot of who maybe who she
Mm-hmm.
once was, and also the idea of not wanting help from others. And I don't
Mm-hmm.
want to say too much, but I do want to equate it to being an RN. You're the caregiver. You're the
Mm-hmm.
one helping
Mm-hmm.
everyone. And it's not likely that the personality that's the caregiver is going to be looking to get the care. So is
Right.
that how much of you is in Kat or in other characters? Ginger is certainly very
Yeah.
creative.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a little bit of me in everybody for sure. But I think women in particular, we don't want to let people down. And in fact, we have been charged with the world and we're not supposed to let people down. In fact, our whole goal is to sort of unpersonify ourselves so that the other people around us can reach their full potential. And Kat recognized early on that if you're that person, you could fail and then there are grave consequences. And she was like, I can't do that. That's too much for me. And what she has to learn really over the course of her life is that she's not totally in charge and that she's overestimating her ability to change people, and also she's overestimating her effect on people, and in some ways underestimating it. So I think that I always say that I write everything like when I think about people, I think one of our biggest struggle is how much to keep and how much to give. And I just can't stop thinking about that. I think in all relationships, your postal relationship, how much do I tip my mailman at Christmas? And your, love relationship, like I don't want to go to his parents' house. Do I have to do that? Is this the kind of compromise we're talking about? Like there is no relationship where we're not kind of going, how much am I allowed to ask for? And a certain generation of women, I really have been told we're not allowed to ask for anything until the end of the day, and maybe we can ask for something, but maybe not in
Yes,
my
there's a
character.
real emotional transformation throughout the
Mhm.
arc. There's the arc of story. But each character, I feel, also goes through a transformation.
Yeah.
How did you, on the granular, how did you structure that with the plot, with the transformation? Did you print it out and highlight? Like, what's your technique, Anne?
Well, I'll tell you what, I wish I wouldn't have, it was hard. I wish I wouldn't have had so many characters. But like one of the things that I do is like I'll put all the characters, the most important characters in a grid, and or a drawing, and I'll try to figure out like make sure that everybody is affecting everybody. And then I sort of try to figure out what little thing is it that they're going to change. Like, of course, the largest protagonists, the largest characters have to change the most, but I think it's really satisfying if everybody changes it along with them, since the camp is going through this large metamorphosis. So everybody's going to be affected from it. So I draw pictures, I write graphs, I chart out the entire book, and then I look at it and I think, is this when he should be changing? When is it best? And then some of it is like the magic of it coming together and you can't take credit for it. You know what I mean?
Yes, yes, it's that metamorphosis when all
Yeah.
the pieces of the puzzle, like you kind of the editing side of the
Oh
brain,
my
which is
God.
a different side.
And then honestly, if there's one thing that I think probably people need to understand is I edit so much. I edit on the granular level. I edit on the larger edit. I write the first page over 1,000 times. I like, and I go read my favorite books and I read their acknowledgments and I hear what they say, which is, I was editing and this person helped me and this person helped me. So I remember that you don't just sit down and write a book, right? You write it again, you write half of it again, you fix it. And the amount of shenanigans that goes on while I'm editing a book and making it all go together, it's like a car on two wheels rounding a corner, and you just kind of hope you're going to get there, you know?
Yes, I appreciate hearing about the gridding because I think that's important that you're looking to see, okay, so how does Gary connect with this one? How does he connect
Mhm.
with Ginger? And so are you then inserting the dialogue when you see like a connection, or how does that work? Or are you doing that after the fact?
Well, no, I write linearly, and then I think really hard about my primary protagonist is the one that's driving all the action. And I am putting everything in her way to make her change the way I want to. And so everybody there also is a prop to put in her way. And so, Gary is in her way because she can't figure out what he means at the camp or what he's there for, and if he's on her side or against her side. And her sister is always in her way, and she has to decide whether she's going to always see her as an antagonist, or is she going to see her as a grown-up. And her nephew is in her way because she doesn't want to let him down and she cares so much about him. So every single person is in her way to change because she doesn't want to change, and somebody's forcing her to change. And then through that, because nobody is like a non-dynamic person in our lives. So nobody is a non-dynamic character. Everybody changes because they're all affected by the changes. So it's like I always think if I could just write a book as if it were 3D, it would be so much easier. But and I do it like I'm painting a wall. Like I'll be like, okay, I think this is how I have to do it. And then I have to go back to make sure that everybody else is playing along and getting it right. And it's like that. I always use this one. It wasn't the dark side, it's somebody else, but there's these two old men and they're writing an equation on the blackboard. And it's a very complicated equation. And then it says some magic happens here. That's like my graphing is all happening. And then some magic happens. And that magic is something I'm not really in control of.
Some people have told me that they write like way overwrite. Like if the book
Oh,
is supposed to be 90,000 words, they're writing 130,000 words and then they cut it down and
yeah,
like
yeah.
way down. Is that something that you do?
No, I underwrite. I always underwrite. And I think it's just because I think everybody is thinking the same way I am. And then I have to go back there and explain it, or I have to go back in there and sort of clarify what I was trying to say or do. So I typically underwrite. And then as I edit, and if I work with my editor will be like, well, what were you trying to do there? And I think, can you tell, like, what do you mean? And then I have to go, oh, yeah, they're not in my mind. And then I have to add a little bit there, or I have to like take the reader through it. I have to like take their hand and walk them through my thinking so that they get the full experience of it. So I'm always an underwriter. I know it's funny because I know that most people do overwrite, but I think it's because I just think I'm always talking in shorthand. I always think that maybe they're with me on it, but they're not. They're not with me.
That's so interesting. And I also appreciate that you said that you started this around 2016, did you say? So,
Mhm.
it's a process, and
Yeah.
you today, Anne, are a different person than
Oh,
you
yeah.
were in
Yeah.
2016.
Mhm.
And I mean, I know you have love in your life. You had a modern love that came
Mhm.
out of a different piece that you had written.
Yeah.
And you're a different person than
Yes.
him. So that probably also informed
Yeah.
putting the novel to, although the novel I think was out before you found the love. I'm not sure though.
Yeah. I think it was finished before I did. Yeah.
Right, right.
It's
But
about,
still
I
the
think I turned it
evolution.
in. Yeah. I turned it in right around the same time as I wrote that article. But I think I didn't know what I was trying to say with Bummer Camp before when I was writing it. And then I put it away for a long time. And then I pitched it and they bought it. And I thought, well, now I got to figure it out. And I think I had gone through enough more stuff and uncovered what I was really trying to say. And it took me a while to figure out what I was trying to say.
Yeah, it's a process because I do talk to a lot of writers who are like, "Oh, I put out a book a year
Oh, I don't know,
or
honestly.
2 a year," and I'm like, "What?"
I don't know how they do it. I I I try not to even pay attention to that, although I know a lot of people that do, and whenever they do, I have to be like, "No, don't listen," because it makes me just anxious to think about it.
Each thing is a process.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
so you talk about, underwriting, and that's sort of a challenge that you have to fill in the gaps and figure it out. Are there other challenges that you faced in writing Bummer Camp?
Yeah, I mean, I think moving the plot forward is really important to me. And I think it's hard for all writers and I really want to make sure that there's tension in every sentence and tension all the time so that people feel that they need to keep going to sort the tension out. And sometimes I'll write and I'll think, "Oh my God, I love this line." And I'll think, "Yeah, that's a great line, but there's no tension in that line and you have to get rid of it." So I think always, like, I spend a lot of time sort of sitting like this going, well, what could go next? Well, that could go next. That doesn't seem right. And trying to go back to what I'm trying to do in the scene and making sure that there is enough tension to keep the action going. The action is really important to me.
That
Uh,
yes, there is a lot of movement in this
my God,
book.
there's so much running around. Like I get so tired of trying to find a new word for run or rush or, like,
There
yeah,
is, it's going from here, it's driving, it's going to camp, it's thinking about yes.
yeah,
So you have a lot of chapters, and they're short. Each
yeah,
chapter is pretty short, and it's over 40 chapters.
yeah.
So
It's a lot.
it's a lot. It is a lot. So how did you decide to do that, to have the short chapters?
I think it goes along with my writing short that I tend to write a little bit of a shorter chapter. And I think probably because I want the scenes to keep moving, that the longer the chapters, sometimes you can lose the tension in it.
Yeah.
So if I concentrate on trying to get the chapters around 2,000 words each, then I know that I am getting to the sweet spot of that. And in some ways, I think each chapter is a little bit like an essay or a short story, and it should start with something, a question, and finish with the answer of that question and ask another question before we go into the next one. So it should be its own little world each chapter and then, but open up the door to the next chapter.
How do you open up the door to the next chapter with each chapter?
Usually it ends up being like, there's the question answered, and she's gonna go get that question answered, and you wanna know what the question is. Or some new catastrophe has gone on, and she's gotta shift her plan, and you need to know what that plan is, or some new revelation that is thrown in her way, and she's gotta figure it out. And my hope is that it's like whenever I'm watching a television show and I think, "Oh my God, how are they gonna get out of this one?" That's kind of what I want people to do, you know, through the course. And I don't know whether it always works or not for everybody, but it's certainly something that I'm trying to do. Like, I
And
don't know
then
if it always works, but
yeah, and there were a lot of surprises in the book, which I really appreciated. I also appreciated the way you started. So it's sort of like in media res, a literary term right in the middle. And I'm just going to read that first part.
okay.
The chapter one is called Old Maid of the Mist, which actually has resonance for me because that I was on a trip with my husband. We were going to Toronto, but first we were in Niagara Falls. And that's when I told him that I was pregnant.
Oh, oh my gosh,
After
that's a great.
dealing with infertility,
Oh
after
my
dealing
gosh,
with
how
infertility, it
wonderful.
was magical. It was
Oh,
magical.
so magical.
So
Yeah.
I really loved reading that chapter one. So this is how it starts. The first rescue me text from her sinkhole of a sister, Ginger, came in the middle of the night. Kat had been mentally flipping through the roster of pretty good colleagues, wondering who she could wake if her water broke somewhere other than in a hospital bed. Calling 911 should be reserved for heart attacks and burst spleens, not a healthy pregnant lady who could sit on a towel and drive herself 25 minutes if push came to labor and delivery. So that's like, okay, we get a lot of information right away. Her
Yeah.
sinkhole of a sister is texting her, wanting something from this woman who is pregnant and
Mhm.
very self-sufficient. That's all in this first paragraph. So that's such a fascinating way to start, right, in the action. And how did you decide to start there?
Let me think it. Did I have it started in other places before? No, I think I always started it right there. And I think it's because, I really just, I don't like a lot of throat clearing in the beginning of a book. I kind of like to just get into it. And so I really want to make sure that whatever is happening right then.
Yeah.
And then I spend a lot, like I probably have written that first chapter. I hate to say how many times I've rewritten it because I'm trying to get the right information without too much telling, without slowing it down. And I struggle with that a lot. I'm constantly checking on it or rechecking it and then putting it away and rechecking it. So I don't do it easily, I guess I should say.
Mhm.
But I am always having a good time when I'm doing it. Like, I do love that first chapter, even though because it's like
Yeah.
breaking open a puzzle, and
I could I could see your joy in the writing. I just felt your visceral joy in the writing. And it's interesting because there's the novel Save the Cat, right? Save
yeah,
the Cat writes a novel and it talks about beats. And it talks about in the third act, wherever that may be, you kind of rally the troops.
yeah,
And there is a part in the book where you rally the troops. And I was like, yes, yes, let's go. And not that they didn't have things that they had to deal with, and they
right,
did. And there was also a big reference to Wizard of Oz that
yeah,
came in very strong.
yeah.
So, is that something that you wanted to really put a focus on? And also the Wizard of Oz, is that something you wanted to focus on?
What's really funny about that, and I think this is part of, like I said, the magic of writing. When I'm writing a book, I only really know what I'm trying to say and who this character is. And then as I get to know her more and more, things happen you know, in sort of the story that I'm learning at the same time the character is. And one of the things when I knew that it was a kids' theater camp, and I was like, well, wouldn't it be funny if if the only uniforms they had to wear was one of the costumes at the camp? And then I was like, what are the plays that have the most people in it? And I was like, well, The Wizard of Oz had a lot of people in it because of all those munchkins. And then when I decided that they were going to be heavily figured in the book, I thought, oh my God, that's who they are. And so I didn't think I was going to be doing that until I had them in their costumes. And then yeah, so like, then I realized, oh, maybe I was always going towards that. And I didn't even know it. Like, I've had some executive function that was really working hard trying to get my attention. And I was like, la, 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 while I was writing it.
That's so fascinating because I'm a former theater kid. I studied voice, I was in
Yeah.
drama all the time, and it just really brought that feeling home to me. And I think it will for a lot of people. I want to pivot a little bit to how your brilliant idea for promoting the book came about.
Yeah.
You created your own sort of adult bummer camp. Can you talk about it?
I can. So I went after I'd written most of the book. I thought, well, I better go back up to that camp and see if there's anything that I'm missing or misremembering or whatever. And maybe I'll get some more ideas for things. And so I went up there and my friend came with me and I was walking around the camp And I was like, I wish I could bring people here. It's such a special place. And it would be so fun to have like an event here, like just with friends or whatever. And I thought, oh, they'll never come. And then I asked the woman, I said, do you guys ever rent this place out? She goes, yeah, we do. You could bring whoever you wanted. And then I started working with the woman who helps Terry with Irma.
Sarah.
And I said, Sarah, would you want to do this with me? And she was like, yes, that sounds so fun. And so, we planned it really quickly, and we had 60 women from 10 states come, and some people knew me, a lot of people didn't. And we just sort of reenacted in some ways some of the things that happened in the book. And then, like, we already have 100 people signed up for next year that are interested in maybe doing it again. So it was so much fun because you just have to bring them there. Camp itself does it all. The place, the outdoors, the boats, the water, like it does it. And so everybody was able to feel sort of what I felt working there and then also writing the book.
That is just so brilliant. It really is. And kudos on its success and the success of your book. This has been such a great discussion. Are you working on another book, or are you just kind of relaxing a little bit in between,
No,
enjoying your relationship?
Yeah, no, I just sold my next one. I have a year to write it, and it's a funny and sad thriller.
Ooh, well, that's exciting. You'll have to come back on the program and talk all about it, because it's such a gift reading your work. And thank you so much, Anne.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Follow me at estelleserasmus.com on my website and on social media, which is Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter at Estelle S. Erasmus. And we're now on YouTube for Freelance Writing Direct. Follow along, and soon everyone will be reading what you're writing.